I keep doing this to myself. Actually, this is not my fault this time. The video file corrupted. You're not creative or original, but the thing is, neither is anybody else nowadays. So you don't really have to worry about it. But I wanted to look into why that was. So I was working on my business the other day, working on sales funnels. Ooh, so smart, I know. Why do I even say that? Anyways, I needed to take a break because it was really hot outside. So I decided to dive into the pool. And I was thinking about video ideas. And at the time, I hadn't really thought of that many. I don't think I had even made my first video yet. So naturally, what came to mind was the video idea that everybody else does, which is, oh, I can't think of a video idea. I should make a video about thinking of a video idea. Which I'm sure the first 100 times it might have been alright, but because everybody and their mom has done it, it kind of ruins it. It's not the same anymore. So instead of looking into that problem, I wanted to look into why people aren't creative when it comes to making videos. And for the record, most people don't make videos because they don't feel creative. A few different concepts and ideas came up while I was in the pool. One of them was originality. So we hear about originality really from everywhere nowadays. People are really worried about coming up with something that's not original, when in reality, nothing is really original. I knew logically that the internet and media makes it really hard to come up with original ideas because everything already seems to be taken, because there's this huge, vast library of knowledge on your phone. So instead what I did was I started looking into alternative ways of thinking about creativity and originality. I found one quote by Mark Twain. He says, "There's no such thing as a new idea. It is impossible. We simply take a lot of old ideas and put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope." Which honestly, it makes sense when you think of it like that. When you think of creativity in this way, it kind of opens your eyes more and it helps you see not just creativity and problem solving, but the world in a whole different lens. So now that I had this in mind, the idea that creativity doesn't actually exist and everything is just kind of mashed together and called new, I decided to look at the internet and think about how creativity and originality actually applied to the internet and media and everything new nowadays. The conclusion I came to was that the internet can actually be really useful and really helpful when it comes to creativity, but it has to be used right. The main problem with the internet and media nowadays is that people don't use it correctly. In fact, they abuse it. You've probably done it. I know I do it. I surf through YouTube for hours, or some people play video games for hours and hours on end. Some people just scroll through social media, and you know, I'm not one to judge because, again, I do it too. So it is what it is. But that's not really using media to your advantage. It's frankly abusing it. And the reason that it's considered abuse instead of use, at least in my opinion, is that people tried to make it a substitute for their imagination. So let me rewind a little bit. I went to a school from 3rd grade through 8th grade. It's known as a Waldorf school, and it's a different approach to teaching. I won't get super into it, but one of their main focuses is on imagination and creativity and thinking outside the box. All throughout kindergarten through 8th grade, they encourage students to think outside the box and come up with their own solutions to problems. Obviously, we still learned Common Core and all the stuff we're supposed to learn. We just learned it in a different way through a different approach. And honestly, I think it worked. Personally, I'm not very artistic, so not all of it applied to me, not all of it really worked with me, but the other students that I saw who were more artistic used that problem solving and that creativity to come up with entirely new ideas that I had never seen or thought of before. And it was small. It was like different ways to blend paint or different ways to find the solution to a math equation. And that's where I specialized. I was good at finding logical answers through non-traditional ways. Nowadays, in my day-to-day life, I see that working. I see myself thinking outside the box in a different course, but I still come to the same solution. And because I came up with it in a way in my own mind, it's natural to me. I don't have to really strain myself to do it. The first time I really noticed this was when I noticed I could take really big numbers and divide them by single digits, and then that evolved into double digits. And it's been a minute since I've had to use math, so that skill's a little rusty, but the point is, it was there at one point and I could do it and it impressed people. The reason it was so impressive was because I didn't think the way that most other people do. And that doesn't make me better or worse than anybody, it just means I think about things differently. And the same way you most likely think about things completely differently than the way I do. But the school that I went to, they acknowledged that and accepted that and actually encouraged students to use their own perspective on things and use their own ideas to find solutions and think outside the box. So when it comes to media and the internet, I think they stop people from thinking outside the box, and that's the main reason that there's so many problems with it nowadays. I don't mean to sound like a boomer and say that media and the internet and TVs and phones and screens are bad, because, realistically they're useful. They're tools and they can do a lot of really good things if we use them properly. But I think honestly people aren't using them properly. They consume media as some kind of poor substitute for imagination, and then when they can't think, they blame the school system. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the school system is perfect either. There's lots of flaws there. There's lots of flaws with media. There's flaws with everything. That's just the reality of the situation. And I'm also not against media or the internet either, but I am advocating for people to use their own creativity and their own solutions and their own problem solving to actually solve their problems instead of relying on somebody else's perspective and relying on other people's ideas. I think this is one of the main reasons that people don't feel creative nowadays, is because they're constantly relying on others for solutions. During high school, I went to a mainstream school, which was fine. I already had those alternative ways of thinking installed in my mind, so to speak. But it did give me the chance to see how other people thought and the way that other people went about solving problems. The main thing that I noticed was that they felt like if they were taught a certain way, they had to solve the problem that way every single time. The place that most people see that is in math, especially with like Common Core now. A lot of people think it's stupid because they're showing multiple ways to solve the same problem, but they force you to use all of them instead of just picking one that you like. Personally, I think that's a great idea. I just think it's implemented wrong, but that's a conversation for another time. But the way kids are brought up nowadays, whether it's through media or the school system or through their parents, they're not as creative, and it leads to all kinds of problems, or rather the inability to actually solve the problems that come up. Again, this isn't to say that I'm against media or looking at others to find solutions. In fact, I'm a huge advocate for it, and I really think that's a great idea. I just think it should be accepted and allowed. I don't know about other countries, but I know in the US there's such a stigma against plagiarism that any kind of inspiration from other people's ideas is kind of looked down upon because it seems like stealing their idea. Really, this isn't the case. I mean, they do that in classrooms when it comes to making art. They'll have the teacher up in front of the classroom doing whatever art they're supposed to do, and then all the students are supposed to copy it as close as they can. The thing is, though, not all of those pieces of art look the same, and the reason for that is because the teacher's just there to build the foundation for the students to build upon. Okay, so what's my solution here? Well, first of all, anything I say should be taken with a grain of salt. I'm only 18, I'm still new to this world. But personally, I think that we should shift our perspective on media and look at it as a tool instead of a toy. Instead of using it as a poor substitute for imagination or creativity, look at it as an alternative to finding answers that you can't find in your mind. In other words, if you can't think of something and you've tried every approach and you're just struggling to come up with something, then go to the internet and find some kind of seed so that you can at least start thinking about alternative ideas. This is kind of how we learn, is we have our base knowledge, we have our foundation, and then we get little pieces elsewhere, and then we grow upon those seeds. It's also why we can't memorize all of anything all at once. We have to get introduced to the idea, and then we have to grow upon that concept. This also explains why nobody's ever good at anything their first try. It's just the nature of things. So instead of media and the internet being the leaves on the tree, it would be the seed that helps sprout the roots, that helps grow the tree. It's the introduction to new ideas, not new thoughts. And ideas are a little more tangible. Thoughts are something that kind of grows upon those ideas that you find. Obviously, this won't be perfect every time. Sometimes people stumble, sometimes they can't grasp a concept. Sometimes people struggle with things that they've done 1,000 times. Honestly, this video is a good example. I'm struggling right now. And the reason for that is that my train of thought isn't fully awake. I'm not really thinking all the way, but I do need to get this video done. But in this case, you can see how media is being used as a tool. I'm struggling to think, but I can chop this video up and I can edit out the parts that I don't like, where I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about. This isn't saying I'm an expert, it's just saying that I know a thing or two and I'm just sharing my thoughts here and then cutting out the things that I'm not sure about. Anyways, hopefully this helps you see things from a new perspective and at least get your mind thinking about new ways of seeing the world. Obviously, this is just my point of view, so again, it should be taken with a grain of salt. But I have to go edit this video in a very short amount of time, and I have to make it look somewhat decent, so hopefully I can do that using the magical powers of media.